I grew up with this couch.
Really?
Yes, it was in my childhood home. Yeah.
I don't think I...
That's where it got the name, the kidney couch. It's shaped like a kidney.
Yeah, I always knew that part.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yes.
But I didn't know it was from your childhood home.
Yes, right. And when we moved it to Wisconsin, when Pete and I, my parents sold their home and moved to an apartment, and Pete and I moved this to Wisconsin, but I had it reupholstered. It was kind of a brown.
Oh yeah, the pink's better.
Yeah, and then I had it reupholstered in this color.
Yes.
I happen to be, is it on?
It is on.
Okay. I happen to be sitting on the kidney couch, and this is something that I grew up with. It was in my family home on Gladstone Avenue in Minneapolis, and it gained its renown because once when Pete and I were dating, my mother had heard us walk in the door, but then it was very quiet. So what she did, she threw a shoe down the stairs behind us, and Pete and I were on the kidney couch. And so Mother threw a shoe down, and we, okay, then we started talking again. So that was part of the history of the kidney couch. Okay, and
That's awesome. I never knew that story.
you didn't know that?
No.
Part. Yeah.
What age was that?
Yes. Pardon?
What age was that? Or what, like, grade?
Well, Pete and I were probably seniors in high school because
Okay.
we dated in high school.
Yep.
We went to junior high together, so basically we met in 7th grade and went all through Ramsey Junior High School, Minneapolis, and Washburn High School in Minneapolis together, so 6 years. And we started dating basically when we were sophomores and seniors in high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were both sophomores?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
we're
Yeah,
the same.
yeah, same age.
In the same class.
Yeah.
Same
Yeah.
age, yeah. Yeah.
Alright.
Yes. Yeah, so we dated a long time because then after high school, I went off to college, to Vassar College in New York, and Pete went to the University of Minnesota. And I think we both dated a bit in college, but always spent summer vacations dating in Minneapolis. And then eventually we married after I graduated from college in 1954, and Pete had 2 more years in vet school.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
he was at the University of Minnesota vet school for the first 2 years that we were married. Yeah. And during that time, we lived partially in my folks' house because they went up to BBL every summer. And so Pete and I spent the first summer living on Gladstone Avenue, and then we had an apartment in St. Paul. And at that time, I was working as a child welfare worker for the state of Minnesota. Pete's last 2 years in vet school. And so then in 1956, right after he graduated, we moved to Berlin, Wisconsin. And if we all have our dates correct, Karen was born on the 4th of July, 1956, right after we had moved to Berlin. And fortunately, I think we lived across the street from the doctor. So I knew right away I knew a doctor right away, and by golly, he was the one that delivered Karen.
Because you moved when you were like 8 months pregnant.
Yes, yes. I was 9 months pregnant. Yeah.
Seems like an interesting choice of a time to move.
Yes, yes. And the pictures of me, and we had all of our belongings in a trailer that Pete's dad had somewhere found, and we hauled it behind, I don't know, somebody's car. I don't remember. Must have been our car. And the pictures of me standing next to that trailer with my large stomach, I have visual memories of that picture, yeah. But let's back up a little bit.
Yes.
Because growing up in Minneapolis, I have 3 siblings, 2 sisters and a brother, who are 6, 8, and 10 years older than I am. So, and it was during World War II, and my brother went off to war. He was in the Marines. He went in right, well, actually, it was before he graduated from high school. My mother kind of, I'm a chip off that old block. My mother talked the administration into letting him graduate from high school early because he had all the credits and bright young man. And so he did have his high school diploma and joined the Marines in January 1942, which was right after Pearl Harbor. Yeah. And then Martha graduated from had graduated, and so she got married soon thereafter. So in many ways, I was kind of an only child growing up. The years I remember most was just Mother, Dad, and I, and the Gladstone house in Minneapolis. So those are kind of my memories of growing up. My dad, he was worked in the insurance business. He was an actuary and went off to work in downtown Minneapolis all day, every day. Mother never worked as long as I knew her, as long as I was there. She had a master's degree in math. And way back then, that was a big, big deal. And she had taught at the college level in somewhere at a university in Iowa. She was older than my dad by 5 years. So I think she was teaching when he was a student at the University of Iowa. And then they moved up to Minneapolis. So.
Wow, that's really unique for that time.
Yes, it really is.
Yeah.
When
both like the level of education and also like the her being older and
it was unique, and I guess it speaks to the importance of education in our family, because all of our 4 daughters have 4 grandparents, all of whom graduated from college. Now that is quite unique back then, because that had our parents who were born right around 1900, all of whom went to college. Now that is, and it shows that, and it goes down to your generation. All of you have graduated from college, and so we've just seen the importance of it, and it has carried on through the generation. And I'm proud of that. That's really neat, I think. Yeah. Okay.
So tell me a little bit about what your family was like growing up. So you kind of described who was there
Well, that's
and like
kind
what
of
they were
it.
doing.
I don't have a lot of memories, and I think it's mainly because my siblings were really out of it.
Mhm.
And I had a best friend who lived up the block, and Joanne and I were together a lot. And I played outside a lot. And frankly, I think my memory is I was playing alone a lot because I never played with my siblings. I played a lot of tennis, and of course that threw me in with having kids to play with. And I went ice skating and skiing, and again, I guess those were kind of my buddies, and that was that was pretty much my family. We lived in South Minneapolis, a very residential area. Surely not highfalutin or anything, but very comfortable, very comfortable. And I was always safe. I went downtown. I'm trying to think. I think I took ice skating lessons in downtown Minneapolis, and I can remember the big arena down there, and I can remember getting up and going down alone on the streetcar, and I would, just get in and pay my dime and ride downtown Minneapolis and feel perfectly safe. My parents felt very safe having me do that. So I guess I reached out to group sports because there wasn't a whole lot of family to play with. But I have forgotten one very, very important part of it, and that is going up to BBL, to Bass Lake, every summer, during the war especially. Mother and I would go up to Bass Lake and spend the summer up there.
And then your dad would stay and work.
He stayed and worked, and most times would come up over the weekends. Yeah. And that is on Bass Lake around Brainerd, Minnesota. And my sisters, my two sisters, Martha and Judy, inherited Bass Lake because Pete and I, by that time, we had Haleakala and were in Wisconsin. My brother ended up in California, and so neither one of us wanted Bass Lake. And so, but it is still in the family with my sister's kids, grandkids, and great-grandkids. So, and we've gone up there. In fact, last summer, we were up there for a memorial service for my brother-in-law, Bill, Judy's husband. So Bass Lake played a very important part. And that was just, I had a buddy up there, a fellow who lived in the cabin next door. I mean, next door being half a mile away. But we used to swim together, and that was back, I think, when we were both 12 or something like that. And we would play together a lot. So that was big in my growing up, going to Bass Lake. And then after Washburn High School, I went to Vassar. And
Vassar was all women.
It was all women at that point, yeah. And I can't say it was a very good fit, to be very honest with you, because it's a very well-known at that point, it was a well-known women's school. And many of the students had gone to private high schools and whatnot, and I just didn't feel at one with them. But I enjoyed, I have made good friends out there. A few of us, kind of public school kids, would get together. And so I came back to the University of Minnesota for my junior year. It was very common at that time. Many of the women went to Europe or somewhere for junior year abroad, it was called. And I took my junior year abroad in Minnesota at the university. And it was partly to be with Pete, and we needed to kind of solidify our relationship. And we did during that year that I was there. But I went back out to Vassar for my senior year and graduated from there and came back. And 6 months later, married Pete. So that's kind of my growing up, I guess, before BP, before Pete. Yeah, anything I missed that's major there?
Yeah, so how about what's one memory that sticks out from your childhood? Like one vivid memory, significant or not?
Oh my. Well, I guess one memory is skiing down our front hill. Our house was high on a hill. We were at the corner of the block, the south corner. And the house was way at the top, and then a sloping lawn that went down to the road, and with a huge oak tree in the middle. And I remember well skiing down that hill and missing the tree, but that was always kind of a challenge, not to hit that big huge tree that was like this. So I guess that stands out. And just being in Minneapolis during the war, my dad was what was called an air raid warden. And when they would blow these sirens, and at that point, it was like having a fire drill. We were having a drill of German airplanes flying over Minneapolis. And so we were all to turn off all of our lights. And if we had any lights on in the house, we had to have curtains so that the airplanes up above couldn't see the light of the houses. And my dad would go around a couple blocks to check that everyone had their lights off. And that's a memory I have of World War II. Yeah, it was a scary time.
Yeah.
And I think we forget that now, because Minneapolis had an army base, Fort Snelling. Fort Snelling was, I think it was in St. Paul, but it was in the Twin City area. And so it was thought to be a target for the Germans. Yeah, flying over. So those are some memories. And of course, just being up at BBL was fun. Swimming and rowing the boat and swimming out to the raft and diving off the raft and having fun in the lake. Yeah.
What was your first memory with Papi that you remember? Either in your relationship or not.
Yeah, probably not in the relationship. He was very handsome and very tall. He was the tallest guy, and he played basketball and was a very good basketball player. I guess that was kind of my first memory of him, and I knew him all the way up, but we didn't date until, like I said, sophomore, junior year.
What changed that made you?
I don't know. I think we both were growing up. Sports were very important to Pete. Surely golf was the most important thing. He spent a lot of time practicing and playing golf. And that's why I took up golf, so that I could play with him. And I took golf lessons also, so I guess as an athlete, that was kind of my first memories of him. Yeah. And he was a very popular guy. And the tall girls in the class really didn't like me because I was dating the tallest guy. And I was far from the tallest woman and girl in class. That was kind of funny, especially one girl used to keep talking to me. You shouldn't be dating that guy. Let him go to one of the tall ones. So it was in sports. Yeah. And then later, well, you asked about, and I think playing sports together is what drew us together, because we did play golf together before we were married, and we played a lot of tennis and badminton. So those were good things to share, and we skied a lot together. I graduated from the hill on Gladstone Avenue to some more serious downhill skiing. And so that was kind of what we did. And we had some really good buddies who were also dating. There were 3 pairs, and we did a lot together, kind of going canoeing together. And actually we went canoeing up in the Quetico Superior National Forest. That's what it was called. It's the Boundary Waters now. Pete's dad went along as a chaperone. And the 3 couples went along, and we were the only one of those 3 to go on and get married, interestingly enough. Yeah, so their pair didn't last. But that is what I think attracted me and helped us form a close relationship and in the end get married. Yeah.
How did he propose?
Oh my goodness. I think we were, this is how I happen to remember. It'd be interesting to talk to him. Come on now. My memory is he brought me home from a date, and often that meant climbing the stairs up to our house at the top of the hill. And I was, at that point, and I still do it now, if I want to hug someone, I stand a whole step above them. Well, I was standing a step above Pete. And I remember he said, I think maybe I would like to marry you. Will you marry me? So that's how I remember it. On the front steps of 5115 Gladstone. Yeah. Yeah.
And you think Papi might remember it differently?
Well, it wasn't a big deal. He didn't get down on his knees or anything. It was just that we were kissing goodnight, and, it was just kind of what he said. Mm-hmm. And I think I said something, well, are you going to ask my father for his permission?
That was your answer?
I said that sometime down the conversation.
Did you say yes right away?
Yes, no, yeah, because at that time that was very important. to say, may I marry your daughter? Yeah, that was important. I don't know, is that still a part of the game?
I think it can be.
It can be.
I think
it's nice.
Yeah.
It's tradition.
Yes.
It is tradition.
Yes. I've heard of it both happening, them asking the person and the parent.
Okay.
More for the tradition of it.
Yeah,
But
right.
not necessarily
Yeah.
asking first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was.
So he asked if you wanted to marry him, and what did you say? What's your...
Yes.
There was no pause.
Yeah, no question, no question. Yeah, what I don't remember, I don't know when in that relation was. I almost think it was when we were dating, when I was back at the U of M during my junior year. Because my senior year, I didn't date anyone else. And to my knowledge, he didn't date anyone else.
Well,
So,
hopefully then it was after he had... Hopefully he had asked you at that point then.
I think he had. I don't really, I remember the happening
Yeah.
more than the calendar date.
Well, that's the important part.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. So then we were married on a very cold, snowy day, December 18th, yesterday, 1954. And that was a big year for me because I graduated from college, got my first job, real job, and got married all in 1 year. Now that's kind of amazing. Yeah.
What was your first real job?
Well, that was when I was the social worker
Yeah.
for the
Well, he went...
state of Minnesota.
Yeah.
Yeah. While Pete was still in school. Yeah.
So you were the first breadwinner
That's correct.
of the family.
That's correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Bit of a trailblazer, like your mom apparently.
Mhm. I hadn't thought about it that way, but that's right. Because way back then, education was much cheaper than it is now. And Pete's dad was paying his tuition. So we didn't, all we had was kind of room and board to pay at that point. Yeah. So I was the first breadwinner. I hadn't thought about that.
Go Graham Sanny.
Yes, how about that? And then I retired, however, before we moved to Berlin, Wisconsin, and then did not have a paying job until, well, I'll come up with that later, but 1978 is when I went to work. So what is that? My word, that's 24 years later.
Well, because you moved to you moved, and then immediately had Karen,
Yes.
and you had all four within what, 5 years?
Within 5.5 years.
Yeah.
Karen was born the 4th of July. Sarah was born September 13th. So it's just, yeah, a little over 5 years. I was, either pregnant or nursing for 5.5 years. Busy years, yeah. But it was great, and Pete was working hard at his first vet practice. So we were getting used to his working too, because he hadn't worked as a vet yet. He worked at his first partner was an old doctor, Dr. Blake, I believe, and kind of an old fellow in Berlin who was looking for a young partner to kind of take over the job. And so then I was home having babies and helping Pete, because it meant I answered the phone quite a bit. And I kept the records, the written records and the money records for the practice during that time too. So I had a role to play in the practice. Yeah, yeah. But then, two of his fellow students at the U of M had a practice up in Clintonville, Wisconsin, and they were looking for a third partner. And so they called Pete. And at that, when they first asked, we weren't ready to move. And so he said, no, thank you. And then a year or two later, they hadn't found anyone, and they called back and said, we'd really like you to join us. So at that point, we were kind of ready to move. And so then, that's when we had been in Berlin for 5 years. And I was pregnant again. When we moved, I was pregnant with Sarah. Because Anne was a baby. It makes me tired to think of it. And then we moved to Clintonville. And so then that's where we stayed for the next 50 years of our lives, in Clintonville, Wisconsin. And Sarah was born there. And the 4 daughters went K through 12 in a very good school system. Couldn't say enough about it. All of the teachers lived in Clintonville, so we were friends with them. Pete and I were friends with the teachers, and interestingly enough, Pete served on the school board during that time also. And I was very busy in volunteer activities, and especially in Girl Scouts. Came naturally, having 4 daughters, and I ended up being a troop leader, and then I was on the board of directors over in Appleton, and so I got to see Girl Scouts in that way also, and led a couple of kind of adventures for Scouts for other kids in the area. So Girl Scouts was a very big part of our lives, and as the girls too. Yeah.
So you moved to Clintonville. When did Haleakala come into the picture, and how did it come into the picture?
Okay, Pete and I knew that I had grown up with BBL, so it was a tradition for me to have a lake place. And so we just talked about that. And by golly, in Pete's veterinary practice part of the world, he was out just walking through the woods one day, and a fellow came up and said, what are you doing here? And Pete said, well, we're looking for some property. And this fellow said, well, I have a very nice place for you along the Embarrass River. Come on, I'll show it to you. So we went, and the big stumbling block was it did not have access. There was no road to it.
Was there a building there yet?
No.
Or was it just land?
No, it was just land, yeah. And so then Pete thought about the farmers whose land abutted that property. And there was a fellow who lived on up the river who said, sure, you can go through my fields to get to your place. And so on a handshake, he was illiterate. He could neither read nor write, this farmer. And so they made a handshake of an agreement that Pete and his family could drive across this land And he would do the vet work free for this guy. Signed with a handshake and an X. And that was how that agreement came into being. But then the old man died, and he sold the place, and the people said, no, you can't drive through here anymore. So then he found someone that they could build a road coming in from another direction. So then we built the building that is still there today, but it's much changed and developed. But that is the beginning of Halianto.
A handshake deal and an X.
Handshake deal, yeah. Very interesting. But it was perfect. It was only about 20 minutes from Clintonville. So we could go out there for an afternoon, have a nice picnic. We could swim in the river because the dam was in the river downstream. And it was and in the end we got a canoe and built a little dock there and did a lot of canoeing, and in the winter it froze and we ice skated on it. Do you remember that?
I have very early memories of
Yes.
it. I do remember the ice skating. I don't ever remember swimming in it. Like, my vivid memories of when it was still big enough was
Okay.
ice skating.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember my leg went through once.
Okay.
I have memory of that.
Yes.
I rushed back to be put in the tub,
Okay.
in the warm water.
Out of the cold water
Yes.
into the warm.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Well, at that Haliaco, it was a big part of our lives because often during the summer, the girls and I would go out and, live there, and then Pete would come out at night. We've skipped 4 important items, and that's, I had 4 daughters.
Yes, those are my next questions.
I have 4
Those are my
daughters.
next questions.
Okay, shoot, go ahead.
Well, tell me about Karen growing up.
I'll show you.
What was it like to be the mother of Karen?
Well, okay, I'm going to jump ahead, if you will.
Okay.
Because each daughter has her own strengths. They're very different, but they're very much alike. And I'm sure you see that, and people see it, getting to know them. And they're all very good athletes, and they all were high school athletes and enjoyed that. They're all social beings and had very good friends. And I would say, and then they had different, like I say, strengths that they developed. It was interesting to me that they all worked for Pete at one time, especially during the summers of their college years. They came back and were Pete's veterinary assistant, his VA, and were paid for it. And they all put that on their CV when they went to get jobs. And I think that kind of helped, like prospective employers or educators at different levels of education would say, you work for a veterinarian. So that was kind of unique. But in the end, it was interesting to me that Sarah was the only one who went into a medical profession. We have 2 other scientists, Karen and Amy, are scientists in their higher education, and Anne ended up as I think her PhD is in geology or geography or something like that. ended up in the world of gender issues, which is interesting. And Amy, of course, her PhD is in, I think, microbiology, and she ended up as a school librarian. So figure that out. But she decided that she didn't care for the life of a scientist, so she went into librarian, and that was important for her. Which makes me, let me go back. Amy always has said this influenced her. And this is when when two of the kids had graduated from high school, I decided I did not want to play bridge and golf the rest of my life. And I went to the high school counselor and said, Peter, what should I do? I just really want to do something with my life more than just the volunteer role that I've been playing now for 20 years. And he said, Sanny, you would make a wonderful school counselor. So he said, go back and get your master's degree and you'll get a job right away. And by golly, that's what I did. I spent the next 2 years traveling over to Oshkosh for a master's in social work or in counseling, and ended up as a school counselor in Hortonville, Wisconsin. And I was there for 10 years, and I loved it. It was great. It was a good fit. Peter was right. I think I was good for it. By that time, I'd been a Girl Scout leader for 100 years, or take her or leave it. And I was good working with kids and listening to kids. So those were 10 important years of my life. So I kind of skipped over that. That was kind of, like I say, Karen and Amy had graduated from high school, and Ann and Sarah were still in high school. Ann and I graduated together. I got my master's, and she graduated from high school the same year.
I didn't know that.
So that was kind of fun. And then I have to add one more item here. We had an AFS daughter, Irene, from Switzerland. She was Ann's age, and Ann's friends were wonderful. They made Irene feel comfortable the day she came. And so she had a wonderful, I think it was a wonderful year. Well, I know it was, because she said that she came back for 3 of our daughter's weddings, which says something. And so she's remained. In fact, I had a Zoom call with her a month ago. So we continue to see each other over the ocean. So Irene was an important part of our life. And so it was 3 of us graduating. I got my master's, and Irene and Ann graduated from Clintonville High School. Yeah. So I guess that's the end of that story. Of course, that isn't the end of the story.
No, not at all.
No.
So I only know Karen as an aunt. What was she like growing up?
She was a leader. Yeah, she was a leader, a good athlete. She was not one of the popular kids, so to speak. In fact, they had a gang. There were 4 or 5 of them. They're all girls, and they called themselves the Milk and Cookie Gang. They were the Milk and Cookie Gang. When the other kids would go out drinking on Friday nights, they would go to someone's house and have milk and cookies, they said. And when they graduated from high school, they, I've forgotten his name now, the name of the principal, but they all really liked him, and he liked all of them, because they were all good students. And they said, and so they wrote on the windows of the high school with spray of some sort that was, you could wash it off. Goodbye, Mr. So-and-so from the Milk and Cookie Gang. And everyone looked and, oh, they're those girls, they're doing that. And the principal, bless his whole soul, just kind of laughed at it and said, okay, girls, now clean it up. But she was valedictorian of her class, and but she was a great daughter to have, like us. But they all were, yeah.
So how about Amy?
Amy also was a very, very good student. She was an athlete also. She and Karen grew up at the time that was a channel, or not channel, something 9, Title 9, giving girls the right to have the same sports teams that boys had, and plus a lot of other rights they had. And so it wasn't until their junior and senior years that they were able to be on sports teams. But both Amy and Karen took advantage of that, and they were... Amy was a runner, as I recall. She did very well on the track and field. And I think Karen also. And they both played tennis and kind of those things. But both of them had good buddies and didn't give us, any particular problems at all. So, yeah. And Anne is next. And Anne, too. Anne was great growing up. She was kind of a little scamp in some ways. Nothing serious, but kind of had to check on her every now and then. But she had this wonderful group of friends, like I said, who were wonderful to Irene when she came into the gang, and they all accepted her and were very good to her. But, again, she didn't give us any problems. I think I think the girls felt comfortable talking to Pete and me if something major came up, and really none of them did. They didn't have any major problems. They all, I think Anne and Sarah dated more in high school than the other two did.
Younger children. The younger siblings.
The younger ones
Yeah.
did. Yeah, they dated more. Yeah. And Sarah, I think it was hard for her growing up, being the youngest of 4 very talented daughters. She was kind of, would sometimes bend the rules. And I remember that she was a very good friend. I mean, she knew Peter Farah, the counselor that I went to for counseling, and he was a counselor when she was in high school. And I remember Sarah, all through school, had an H on the end of her name. And so she was Sarah with an H. And unbeknownst to anyone but Pete and me, her birth certificate is S-A-R-A. But I have gone through life explaining my name, and it's a little tiresome. And so I wanted her to have the more common spelling of. So when she entered school, we added the H. She was S-A-R-A-H, Oberhauser. But when Sarah went into high school, she said, I'm going to take that H off. I don't like it. And, we said, well, really? Yeah. And I said, well, I'll go ask Mr. Farah if this is a problem. He's in charge of all the records. So I went in and talked to Peter, and he said, if that's the worst thing she does, we won't make a fuss over it. So he said, I've erased the H already. So he changed her name, and she didn't know that her birth certificate read S-A-R-A. And I don't know when she learned that. I didn't tell her right away.
That she was going back to
That
the
she was
original.
going back to the original.
Yeah, she'd already been there.
Right. So that was.
And was that the
me,
worst thing she ever did in high school?
I think so. I never knew anything worse. Yeah. And then she, of course, went off to Ripon College and met Tim. So that turned out very well too. Yeah. But like I say, she was the one that was attracted to the medical world. Yeah.
So this one's, there's two. What was the best part of being a mom of four, specifically of these four? And then what was the most challenging thing about being a mom of these four?
Well, the best thing, I was proud of them all. They were all outstanding kids. They were not problem kids. And in a small town like Clintonville, that counts a lot. Because if somebody's getting into trouble, that everyone in town knows they're getting into trouble. And frankly, we didn't have that problem at all. And it was just fun to be with them and to share their lives, and to share their friendships. I mean, their friendships with me and with Pete, and also to see the friends that they had, and they were all good kids, and they haven't stayed close to anyone. I don't think any of them really are close to any. Actually, Karen is close to a young man who is Amy's age, and he is now a psychologist, very famous guy, out in Washington, D.C., and she used to kind of go and visit him when she would go out there professionally, when she was doing monarch work and stuff. And he is a gay man married to a very famous black lawyer in Washington, D.C. And one time I have been very proud to be from Clintonville is the night that Tom, no, his name is John, his brother was Tom, who unfortunately died. But anyway, he was the alumnus honoris of Clintonville High School. And Karen and Pete and I went to the ceremony. And here came Tom and his husband, I guess is what you'd say, in their academic robes, walking down the aisle of Clintonville High School, a black man married to a white man. And I just thought, you know, if the world is changing, it's changing right here. That really made me proud to see them. Yeah, yeah. So Clintonville was a wonderful place to raise kids, really. Yeah. Very pleased to have achieved that there. Yeah.
What was the most challenging part?
Well, I think maybe it was having to be there, because being the wife of a local vet was kind of challenging anyway, because Pete was gone a lot of the time working. I mean, he worked at night, you know, kind of every other night sort of thing. And so if things came up with school or anything, often it was left to me to kind of solve it. But again, fortunately, they didn't cause us any hardships, virtually any at all. It for the most part, was much more joyful than giving problems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not going to go through every grandkid because that would be slightly exhaustive. But what are some memories that stand out from the grandkids?
Oh, hey, being at Haleakala together. My parents made a big deal about keeping their grandkids, having them know each other. And we gathered up in Minneapolis every year for my mother's birthday. And we would have dinner at the athletic club with all the kids and grandkids, so my kids. So then, when it came time for Pete and me to have 8 grandkids, 2 from each daughter, it was important to us. And Haleakala gave us that place. And just to see the kids laugh and play together and play ghosts in the graveyard down and hide in this dark dungeon, and just to watch them grow. And I'm very proud of all of you and what you have achieved in your life. You're gainfully employed and you're doing interesting things in this world. You're moving along with the world. None of you is saying, no, not me, I can't. I'm not going to change. None of you has done that. You're doing very interesting things. And education is important, like I said at the very beginning. It's kind of carrying on the Oberhauser tradition that my parents and Pete's parents set way back when. So that's, and none of the grandkids really stands out because you're each unique. And we only have one great-grandchild, but another on the way, and you will be an auntie.
I will.
Yeah. So in that's the next generation. So, but it's wonderful to watch your generation, 2 down from Pete and me. Yeah.
So I have 3 questions left. Still good?
Oh, sure. I'm still good. Are you still good?
I am.
Okay.
Which decade of your life was your favorite, and why?
And
you can either do it by decade of like the 60s, the 70s, like
Yeah.
or it could be like my 20s, my 30s,
Yeah.
whichever you interpret.
Mm. Boy, that's a tough one. Maybe it was when my years of employment, I mean when I was a school counselor, were very special ones. And so I think, and I worked for 10 years, exactly. And I would almost say those were, my daughters were then finishing their high school education and getting their college education. So I guess maybe I really enjoyed it when I was born. I came of age, as it were, during the women's lib, so to speak, and the feminine mystique. I made the mistake, but it wasn't a mistake. It was the best thing I ever did. I read that whole book by, can't remember who wrote The Feminine Mystique, but anyway, I read it when Pete was gone on a golfing weekend. Well, when I realized what I was missing out on, and that was when I was a part of womanhood, as it were, and motherhood. And so I think that's why getting the master's degree at that point, and then becoming employed was important to me because of reading that. Yeah, but it's hard to come up. But I think that those were important things, and they're important to, I would say, all of you. And my daughters are very, really, I would say they're big feminists. The rights of women are very important to all of them. Because actually, and Anne has made a profession of this. So I guess I would go to that decade. Yeah.
Well, before I get, okay, so then the next one is, what are you proudest of in your life?
Pardon?
What are you proudest of in your life?
Oh my gosh. My 4 daughters. Okay, yeah, I'll just say that. And, well, I shouldn't say that because I'm proud also of all of my grandkids. So I guess I'm proud of my family. Yeah. And it's fun because I share a name with 2 of them. And so, and as it happened, they're professional educators, I'll put it that way. And it's been interesting to meet people who know them professionally. And so that I would, be proud of them, but I'm also proud of Sarah and Amy, who changed their names. But yeah, I'm equally proud of everyone in the family. The short answer, family.
It's a good short answer.
Yeah.
Well, so before I ask my last one, is there anything else any other memories or things that came up that you wanted to tell about?
No. I guess not. I'm looking at some of the notes that I took, and I guess I realize how fortunate I am here at the end of life to be here at Oakwood in Madison with two daughters who live, within half an hour, 40 minutes of me. And I get to see them at least once a week, more often if I really want to. So I'm pleased and proud of where I've ended up, I guess I'll put it, with family and friends and green space. Yeah.
So then the last question is, what is one piece of wisdom or advice you have about life?
Okay, and I'm going to quote my sister, Judy, who said this, and I have thought it's very good advice. Don't keep score. Enjoy life for what it is and not for how either you're less than or more than someone else. I say that in silly things like games of Scrabble. It isn't all that important who wins the game. The game is stimulating, challenging, and you do it with family or friends for the enjoyment of it. So don't keep score.
It's very good advice.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, it was a joy to talk with you, Bridget. Thank you so much for doing this.
We started out with we'll do this for a minute and then check in, and then you just went. So I hope it's all right that we didn't check in.
No, that is just fine. It seemed to work.
You seemed very comfortable, so I...
Yes, aren't you nice? You're a good judge. You're a very good judge. Yeah. I've been watching the sun.
Yeah.
Must be setting over the west. And I'm looking out at my sycamore tree, and yeah.